Check, check, check. Check, check, check.
All right, hello, good evening, everyone. I'm not going to gavel in, it's not a meeting, but it is a workshop. But nonetheless, we do want to begin with the formalities of saying hello. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Budget Workshop number 1 regarding budget for year 2024-2025. Let us first begin with a roll call. So I will try to represent Charlotte well. So let us begin with Jason Gagnon. Here. Ethan Goldman.
Here.
Gail Harris.
Here.
Shannon Merriman.
Here.
Claire Nessarella.
Present.
Lorna Thomas Farkason, here. Latoya Yagaloff.
Present.
Thank you so much. And Claire, may you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we are here gathered to engage in more granular details regarding the budget. So with that, I will pass it to our superintendent, Mr. Paul Vicinas.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be able to present to the board this evening on our first board workshop. And I'd like to just begin this evening by introducing my team, the executive team. I'll start, I know that you all know them, but just for anyone listening at home, we have my Executive Director of Equity Advancement, Ms. Teresa Rangel, my Executive Director of Pupil Services, Melissa Cavallero. We have our Assistant Superintendent for Administration, Dr. Andy Morrow. We have our esteemed Director of Budget and Finance, Ms. Elizabeth Hewitt. And of course, we have the very talented Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Ann McKernan. Mr. Duarte, our Executive Director of Human Resources, is home this evening, attending to some family issues, but certainly sends his regards. And if there are any questions in his lane that we cannot answer, we'll certainly get those for you. But I want to make a public acknowledgement for this entire team, for Liz and her office. I want to thank the administrators and members of our West Hartford community that are here in attendance. And with that, would like to just really turn it over to the team to provide you with this presentation and field your questions and see what we can better do to support understanding of our budget.
All right, so before we dig into the specifics of each section, we wanted to go ahead and remind you really of the 4 drivers for our budget for the 2024-25 school year. And that's enrollment, administrative restructuring, special education, and ESSER funding. For enrollment, if you remember, Our annual review of anticipated enrollment and staffing levels are based on the well-established class size guidelines that the board has gone ahead and approved about a decade ago. K-3 students, 23 students, 21 for magnet schools. In grades 4 through 5, 27 students, 25 for magnet schools. The other driver that we have for enrollment is the change in kindergarten start age to 5 years old by September 1st. If you remember, right, this was recent legislation put in place this year, and it allows for the reduction of the 5 sections that we had funded under ESSER. As far as our administrative restructuring, we're looking at a new leadership model that installs an assistant principal at each elementary school. This provides increased building support for safety, for administrative, behavioral, and special education services. We also hope that this enables elementary principals to provide greater focus and greater time on curriculum and instruction. For special instruction and our students who happen to have special needs, our needs continue in this district as we expand to 19% of our students qualifying for services. And the staffing levels reflect these needs and provides the services and resources that our students need to be successful and to continue to grow. And as far as our ESSER funding, as you've heard over the past couple of years, this has been a planned phase out of grant funding and an opportunity to evaluate each of our positions and determine priorities and fiscal constraints, which positions will be folded then into the regular budget as we're losing those ESSER funds. Ann, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I would like to turn your attention to page...
Hold on, Ann. We only have one microphone because of cost cutting.
How much did you save?
Only Andy.
Well, you're-
All right. Good evening, board members. I'd like to turn your attention to pages D4 and D5 of your books. And this is regular instruction at the elementary school level. I'll give you a minute to find that. Okay, so D4 and D5 of our budget book review regular instruction at the elementary school level, and I'd like to highlight a few items. Firstly, we have staffing changes at the elementary level. They're made in response, as Dr. Morrow pointed to enrollment and class size guidelines. We have a reduction of 2 classroom teachers and a 0.6 FTE from the general fund for this year. In addition, as Dr. Morrow also stated, 5 elementary school teachers that are currently budgeted in ESSER will be eliminated for the 2024-25 school year, and that's reflected. The 2 positions are reflected under classroom. The 0.6 is reflected under the special areas. On this page, I'd like to also point out that we are maintaining, we're very excited to maintain our correct teacher residency program, which is an alternative certification program which focuses on diversifying the teaching staff. And we're very pleased to maintain this in our budget and look forward to that program. This page in the budget also reflects the change in the administrative structure in the elementary school leadership, whereby we will have we propose having an elementary school with assistant principals. The structure provides much more support for the principals in managing administrative and special education matters and allows principals to implement new curriculum materials and strategies. As such, the elementary schools will no longer have building-based curriculum specialists.
And as you flip to the next page in your packet, you will see that every section really is done the same. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this as we start. As we go through each section, that's okay. We will review any staffing changes, any programmatic changes, and then the budget impacts that has. So if you flip to page 3 of your packet, you will see the budget impacts of the items that Ann just walked us through. You will see for elementary education.
one? Not the book.
Well, either.
But the packet, go to page 3 of the
Oh, is it
packet.
page 3? Oh, okay.
Did you say D3?
No, page 3.
Of the package.
But you're in D5.
D4, D5. So the way this is set up, if you look at the top of each of your summary pages, it'll say at the top kind of what our area is. In this case, it's elementary education, and then it gives the budget book page references. And then what we're really trying to do here is summarize the information and try to focus and highlight for you the changes, because we understand that the book really goes into a lot of detail and is difficult for all of us to walk through. So this is a way of really highlighting the items that have changed so that you can ask any questions that you may have. So again, when we get to page 3, which shows our budget for the elementary education, you will see we have a slight increase in our salaries. This increase represents our contractual collective bargaining increases with WHEA, offset by the reduction in budgeted positions that we talked about previously. In addition, you'll see that paraprofessional salaries have increased from the prior year. We had hoped that this year we would be able to cover some of our paraprofessional salaries with one of our grants, but we did not have adequate grant funding to do that, and so they are in the current year budget and will remain there for the upcoming year. As we look at our operating expense, we have a slight increase, 0.9%. You'll see some variance between line items, but it's really just based upon the needs at the school level. You'll see primarily variances in our instructional supplies and some software lines. And then we have a very small equipment appropriation that's used to replace outdated items in each of the schools.
Do you want to pause and see if there's any questions, Andy?
We could see, are there any questions at this time?
Claire, and then Ethan.
So the .5 change in salaries, that reflects the 11 curriculum specialists who are certified teachers being off, but then the contract negotiated salaries.
It does, and in fact, if you look at the page before that talks about staffing, there's a total reduction of 12.6 positions in this division. And so it's the contractual increase offset by the elimination of these 12.6 positions.
So in reducing 12, you still have a gain of .5?
We do.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, on your schedule, it has a 18.2% increase in paraprofessionals. Is that just no grant, and there was a grant before, or is that an increase?
No, so that is, those positions have always been with us. In the budget for the current year, as part of the adopted budget, we had hoped to transfer those to grant funding. We were not able to do that, so they had to stay in the general fund. In the current-
That I got, but it's an increase over the prior year.
It's an increase over the current year adopted, is what you're looking at.
Right, no, I understand. So what was?
So last year, when we adopted our budget, we had planned that those positions would be grant funded.
Okay,
We weren't able to do that.
oh.
So
So it's an 18.2% over the budget of last year, but even with the actual
current staffing,
spending of this year, okay.
that was a tricky one.
No, it was gnawing at me, so. No, it's just the way that it's structured. I guess you got to pick one or the other, so. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is about the elementary school teachers, the positions that are going to be eliminated. Is that just because enrollment, like there aren't enough students? So, like, are they just losing their jobs or being repurposed?
So the change is due to the enrollment changes, the normal enrollment change and the particular change in kindergarten that will have fewer students. And then the Human Resources Department will identify the process.
And I'll speak, I was going to say, I can speak to it. And I'm going to use the word reduced versus eliminated, because we're not technically eliminating positions. Our number of positions will go up a year, go down a year based on these enrollment trends. So they're just going to be 7 total fewer positions. We do anticipate, and our Julio, if he were here, he would be able to tell you the certain number of retirements that we already have in, how many retirements might be projected. We're hopeful that there won't be any reduction in force in our elementary. I can't promise that, immediately, but it's a positive picture right now, that it looks like that through attrition, we should be able to shuffle folks around in different positions and be more or less at a staffing status quo. That's our hope.
Is there a date by which you would, like, you ask to know about retirements?
There certainly is.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a very personal decision, and so they will come in at various points. Typically, around this time, we start to get some, and then they may trickle in from now through the end of the year and sometimes even into the summer.
So Paul, I just want to clarify, when you say that staffing would be status quo, meaning we're not hiring or eliminating any positions, I think that's what you mean.
Sorry. I intend no reduction in force in terms of, while we have 7 fewer positions that need to be staffed, we anticipate that we will, between retirements or perhaps, those individuals, maybe I move out of state or any resignations, we anticipate we'll get 7 retirements, resignations, et cetera, so that no one's going to lose a job that currently has a job. That is our hope.
Okay.
I know that a lot of teachers are hired every year. Do you have a ballpark of what is normally the new incoming staff every year?
So I think when we look at retirements, we typically have about 25 retirements of teachers each year. In addition to that, as Paul alluded to, we do have teachers who leave for personal reasons. I think last year, if I recall Julio's report, was approximately 40 teachers that we brought in last year.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify one thing on this paraprofessional salaries that went up 18%. So is that negotiated increases in salary, or is that additional personnel?
So those are personnel who are currently here that had been funded by a grant that we aren't able to fund them with a grant anymore. So they're people who, so it's not increases, it's just reflecting the same staff with a different funding source, in this case, in the general
So
fund.
some of the paraprofessionals were funded with a grant and some weren't?
Yes, most
Okay.
of them are not, but
Most of them are
these
not.
6 we had hoped to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, please continue.
Okay. Okay, we're going to turn our attention to the middle school, the regular instruction in the middle school, which I'm referring to pages D20 and 21 in the book. What page is this in the packet?
I believe it's page 4.
I believe it's page 4 in your package. In our regular instruction for the middle school, we have very slight changes here. The budget maintains the team model at the middle school level. 1 fewer math teacher is budgeted due to change in provision of services, and it is offset by 2 core academic positions which were previously funded with an ESSER grant that are going to be maintained in this general fund due to the anticipated enrollment and class size. We have a slight increase in the unified arts position. Again, that reflects the current adopted budget reflects that current staffing level. And the reading specialist position that we have will return to its budgeted level of 5 positions.
And as we look at the budget for this division, you'll see that there is an increase in our salaries, again comprised of our collective bargaining agreement increases, as well as the additional positions that Ann detailed for us. And then operating expense has just a very slight increase from the prior year, but is really consistent with both the adopted and our expectation for the current year. Happy to answer any questions on middle school.
All right. So we'll move on to the regular instruction at the high school level. This is in your book, pages D38 and 39, and I believe page 5 in your packet. And here we have very, very few changes. We have a decrease where the academic staffing is being reduced by 3.3 positions from the current year adopted budget. That's in response to high school staffing levels and based on a class size of 17 students per FTE. And the reduction is allocated in small amounts across all the subject areas. No other change, yes.
So the alternative high school, was that the program that you brought back on campus? And are details about that going to be in the special ed report?
So this alternative high school is REACH. Reach High School, so that
Reach.
is not a special
It's not about the
education.
reluctant learners.
That is not a special education, that's a regular education program that has a goal of supporting students who may be at risk for dropping
So
out.
is that in this part of the budget right
Yes.
now?
Yes, under alternative high school.
Okay, and that was implemented on campus last year, right? So this is the same,
This is a longstanding, the Reach High School, I don't know, so we have three programs you might be thinking of?
Special education intervention program that was.
the one that was off
Correct,
campus?
it was re-engaging the learners. We'll cover that in the special education.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the SEP program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This has been a longstanding program, there's no changes to its staffing.
And as we look at the, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question, Ethan? Okay. As we look at the budget for this area, again, a slight increase in our salaries based upon our contractual increases with our WHEA contract, offset by some reductions in staffing, as well as where teachers are in the range of the WHEA contract. And again, the rest is fairly consistent with the prior year.
So science, it was the negative, when I'm all for, I'm sorry, I'm all for the decrease in expense, but it was a negative 7%, but you had an additional teacher. Is that
In-
just a function of the individuals?
And which page are you on?
I thought it was on, well, I took it up from your document where science is.
Oh, from.
So I'm looking on, yeah, I'm looking on page D39, and if I see the
Well,
.4 increase in science,
24 increase.
that's one part of, I think, what you're referencing,
Yeah,
Ethan?
hold on, let me find the page.
Yep,
Sorry.
I see it. And so that is, Ethan, it's a function of which teachers are assigned to various subjects. So, we were talking about how every year we have retirements, we have teachers who leave for personal reasons, and as we hire new teachers, they generally come in lower in the range
Right.
than those who have left.
That's
Certainly
what I
if it's a
assumed,
retirement.
but it gets tricky when you're trying to figure this out.
It does. It really does. Because, the range from a first-year teacher to a very experienced teacher is pretty significant. So depending on where someone comes in or how many teachers we happen to have turnover in that year, it can make the numbers swing.
Because I had the opposite question, well, not that there was any increase,
Mm-hmm.
but performance art had a high increase, business had a high percentage increase. So, but it's a function of the individuals?
It's a function of the individuals and their assignments for that year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I just ask, like, a little bit more specific, on page D42, where you have the business finance teachers? So with that's going up like a fairly high percent. Is that hiring of another teacher, or is that also contractual?
So that is not the hiring of another teacher. It has consistent staffing at 4.2. But again, I think it's a function of which teachers are assigned there, in particular because I believe in this area, we also have a DS.
Yes.
Department supervisor teaches one class
Yes.
in this department.
I also believe we had a teacher who was out on leave for a portion of the
Yes.
year, and so
That could have been as well,
we were also,
backfilling that.
yes.
Meaning a teacher was on leave and came back, so it may.
Teacher would be on leave, and then there'd be a substitute that needed to fill in, so there may have been two salaries going against the same FTE because the teacher was on leave.
But that would be budgeted?
That would be a reflection in perhaps in the difference. Wouldn't be budgeted for 24, 25. So if the question is, and I'm looking at the difference on that page you referenced, D42, so a difference of $54,000 in salary. I mean, we can, that's actually under, yeah, that's a subtotal under teacher salaries. We can look back and get you some information, because it would seem to think with the flat staffing that if we've had some turnover and a couple of new employees that that were hired in at a much higher level of experience against the average by which, we would typically budget, that might create that difference. But I would honestly, we would need to look name by name, but I can get that information. I'll record that as a question.
To follow up on that, what percentage of the teachers have you hired for next year versus how many do you anticipate? So yeah, I guess my question is, in some cases, are they a placeholder or are they actual, you're going to hire somebody with a lot of experience?
So in this case, when we do the budget, it's all actual teachers. It's all of our current teachers. If there is a newly created position, then we do make an estimate as to what that individual's salary will be. And we typically pick somewhere mid-range. So at this point in time, it's really too early to know who's retiring and be able to adjust for that.
I just didn't know how many you have hired in advance, so, okay. Okay, yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, that would lead to the
It
different
would.
estimates. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I just back to the business teachers, looking at that, it looks like, so you're comparing the variances based on the actual spend compared to what,
So the variance is based on what our proposed budget is, which says budget 24-25 to what the adopted budget was last year.
Adopted, okay.
Yep, so it's the 361, 660 compared to the 416. So that makes that difference of 54,000, which is a higher percentage than we would expect if that was just the same individuals. So what I will do is I'll go back and look and say, who did we think was going to be in this division for the adopted budget last year? Who really is there? And then what are we expecting next year? And I can get you that detail.
Yeah, and just to provide numbers to what kind of we were saying, since I think if we explain this, then maybe it'll eliminate questions moving forward. When you look at that actual budget in 22-23, and you see it's at basically the 343, I'm sorry, do we have the, no, I'm going to retract my statement. We don't have the actual there. We have the adopted and just the proposed. So I misread the heading. I'll just stop talking.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Moving on to, this is in your large budget book, D70 and 71, and then in the regular, in the handout, I think, I'm sorry, I lost count of the page in the handout, but the topic is
The next page.
the next page, regular instruction system-wide. And we show a very small changes here as well. We see a slight increase in gifted and talented teacher, which was, actually reflects the current actual staffing there. That was slightly higher than what we had adopted, but we had made an adjustment during the year to take care of that. We do have an increase of one teacher in the general fund here for the ESOL program. This program has, this position was in ESSER last year, but with the growth of the program, over 100 students from last year, we did have to increase a FTE. So we took one position from ESSER and put it in the general fund here. Our counseling positions returned to the previously budgeted 25 positions. We had been at 25.8 currently, and we will return to 25.
And as we look at the budget impact of those changes, you can see our salaries, we plan that they will be up approximately $425,000. This is due to our contractual rate increases, the additional 1.2 positions from the adopted budget detailed above, as well as resolution of a collective bargaining issue that we had regarding salary lien replacement for counselors. And that's something we had talked about as we were going over the current year actual results. But happy to answer any questions on that.
Any questions? Yes, Karen.
So I just want to make sure I understanding. Are you saying that the 424,000, which is about 8.7%, that's due to contractual negotiations?
It is, so it's really three things. It's the contractual negotiations, it's the additional 1.2 positions up above the funding for that, and then resolution of this collective bargaining agreement. We had an issue with lane placement for counselors, I'm not sure if you recall. So it's a combination of those three things is making a higher than typical percentage increase for this division.
Okay, moving on to the next page, regular instruction and supervision of instruction, D79 and 78. This line, the budget reflects a modification of the elementary school leadership structure whereby each elementary school will have an assistant principal, and previously we talked about the reduction of the 11 curriculum specialists, so you'll see this change here. The structure will provide support for the principals in managing administrative and behavioral issues and allowing principals time to implement new curriculum materials and strategies. And in addition, the structure will allow the building-based oversight of special education in 504 processes and service delivery, which is a feature of our budget and one of our drivers, as Dr. Morrow pointed out. We also have the reduction of 2.2 department supervisors. This reflects a move from a model that had 2 supervisors in science, social studies, and world language to 1 supervisor in each of those 3 academic areas in the secondary level. We also have the elimination of an instructional coach position for the 24-25 school year, and an increase of 2 non-certified support staff who are supporting our in-school suspension program at Sedgwick and at King Philip Middle Schools. And I think that covers it.
Very good. So from a budgetary standpoint, you'll see our salaries increase 12.5% in this division. That is primarily driven by the creation of the assistant principal positions. And as we discussed, we saw the corresponding offset on the first page in our elementary division. Our operating expenses are consistent with the current year, an increase of 0.4%. For equipment, we do have a slight increase there. That is primarily furniture for classrooms and some tables and files that are being purchased at the high school level, replacement items that are needed in the schools.
Any questions?
I'm not sure what page, I'm trying to figure, but there was a tech support position of a 93.89% change.
There is. So that's in our pupil services division.
Okay.
And so Melissa will get to that, I think, on the next page, actually.
I wasn't sure where it was from. Okay, thank you. And then would that budget also show the loss of the ESSER-funded counselors in the elementary schools? Because you're losing them in the elementary.
So we do have a page at the end of the presentation that goes through all the ESSER, but thank you for asking that. On the previous page, I believe, we did talk about the flat staffing for counselors returning it. And that's also in recognition of not maintaining the counselors that we were supporting through ESSER. So when we presented the budget, we had to make a choice as to how we wanted to reflect ESSER, and we thought it would be disingenuous to say, to just operate from current staffing levels where we had this $5+ million and say, look at all the money we're saving. So we went from what was strictly in the general fund in the adopted budget last year to what we're proposing for this year. So what you'll notably see are adds from ESSER for positions that we did maintain, but we will review all the positions that we didn't. And, to that point, we mentioned there were 5 elementary sections that were previously in ESSER that were reduced, that are not continued. There are 5 counselor sections. There were technically 7.7 total of the counseling sections funded under ESSER, and 0.8 of it that was funded under the general fund. That were not continued. So you only saw a 0.8 reduction on the previous page, but when we get to the ESSER page, there are 7 positions there. And then by counterexample, there was the 1 ESOL position due to growth that we observed where we were able to hire and fund under ESSER, and that growth has maintained. So we're maintaining that position in this current budget, which showed it as an add when Ann described it. But we have a page at the end where we go through all the ESSER positions, and we'll be able to talk about which ones were retained and which ones were not able to be retained.
So with the added responsibilities from a curriculum specialist to a assistant principal, and the loss of the counseling staff within the building, the addition of the behavioral and the restorative justice implementation in all 11 elementaries. So really, the schools are losing some of their behavioral support staff, but yet getting a admin position that can have that disciplinary focus rather than a classroom teacher. Curriculum specialists are classroom teachers and on the teacher contract.
Well stated. I mean, that really, thank you, because it's an opportunity to kind of reinforce the rationale. Given that we were losing that counseling support at the elementary, it really caused us to look at the administrative structure and the jobs that folks were asked to do. So we are introducing the assistant principals and shifting responsibilities very specifically to target student relations, student behavior, 504 administration, and support for special education programming, IEPs, PPTs, things of that nature. We're also looking at our leadership structures in order to support ongoing training and professional development around those things for those 11 elementary assistant principals. And with that comes the ability to free up our elementary principals from having to have primary responsibility for many, not necessarily all, but many of those tasks, and redouble their effort in and around curriculum instruction. And that also dovetails, I'll just remind everyone, that dovetails with the implementation of what our new educator evaluation plan will be next year. So it's really positioning our elementary assistant principals where they kind of need to be in terms of at the forefront of the work with curriculum instruction pedagogy, and it provides them dedicated support and more focused support relative to student relations and behaviors with the assistant principals.
So the tier system, behavioral tiers and learning tiers, would that also be managed by the assistant principals?
I imagine there'll be some shared responsibilities in terms of, I think you're talking about the student success teams and the
Right,
tiers, and I think certainly assistant principals will be engaged with that, certainly for behavior, and there may be some shared responsibilities with some of the reading and or math, but I think also our principals, and currently our principals are certainly engaged and involved with that, and they'll have additional time to have perhaps greater focus with that as well. But I can't say at this point that there wouldn't be some sharing of responsibility.
I would think, too, that by the focus on the 504s, the IEPs, the management of all that, there might be a more streamlining of the special ed services within one building where there's one point person that understands all the individualized plans for the students, and potentially some exiting that could be done by that focus.
Yeah, that is our hope, and I know we'll talk more even around when Melissa has her piece about our plans for supervision within special ed. I'm sure she's got some great insights to share.
It's about the 2 non-certified support staff and school suspension. So did that not exist before and now it does exist? Because it says represents the creation. Is that new? Like it didn't exist at the middle school and now it will?
Yes.
So there wasn't
Yeah.
wasn't in school suspension at middle school,
No,
now there is?
there was, but it was a, when there was a student who was assigned to an in-school suspension, it was either supported by a security guard or by a para. The goal of this is to create a designated para position for this that is able to go through some of our de-escalation training, some of our restorative practices as well.
Beautiful.
And so a one focus point to work with students on this at each of the middle schools,
Wonderful.
Sedgwick and KP.
And if I can reiterate, too, that the principals have been very clear that these people be very engaged in the SBDI training, the School-Based Diversionary Initiative training, and I'm very pleased where they are today.
Nice.
So, Paul, you had said that for every assistant principal that we hire, we're eliminating one curriculum specialist, so it's a 1-to-1. What, do you know what the difference in cost is between what we would have been paying for the curriculum specialists and now we'll be paying for the assistant principals? Or
I know that, I can make a stab, because I think I know the number, but Liz has some specifics. Off the top of my head, I believe it was a difference of, in the neighborhood of $20,000-ish that we were budgeting for the assistant principals. And mind you, that's offset through reductions, as we were saying. We have 3 academic department supervisor positions that we were reducing from the budget, as well as in some of these positions kind of spread over different lines and different pages. There's a 0.9 reduction within the special education pupil services department supervisors, and then packaging that additionally with the addition of an assistant director. I believe the net of the whole restructure, and Liz will throw that number out here at this point.
The net is a savings of 48,000 when we look at that entire administrative restructure that Paul just walked through. So it's a reduction overall of 2.1 positions and a savings of 48,000.
And that would include, is that just salary or does that include like benefits and all of that?
So that is the salary component of that savings. And so we would also save the benefits for an additional 2 employees.
Okay, thanks. Then I can ask one other question. What, if we eliminate the curriculum specialists, who then picks up that piece of it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So currently, and that's not a hard question, it's just an important question, I should say. So currently, our curriculum specialists have primary responsibility for 504. So those duties would be taken up by the assistant principal. Our curriculum specialists share responsibility with the elementary principals for SSTs. So again, I think, as we were saying earlier, there would be components of that work, most likely under the behavioral side, that I might anticipate assistant principals maintaining, but then perhaps some of the lion's share of that work would fall directly for the elementary principal. And then the work that the curriculum specialists had previously done, helping to support, coaching and working with teachers, kind of doing that curriculum end, they would be engaged with being on some of the front end for understanding of what any of the major curricular changes were. That work is going to fall directly and more heavily on the principals. Now, again, not that the principals weren't engaged in that work, but as the principal and the sole administrator in the building, they were juggling all of the teacher evaluation. They were often in many, if not all, of the PPTs in a building. They had to deal with significant behavioral issues. They had to also, work on, do coaching with their non-tenured staff and do all the other variety of things. So now there'll be a much cleaner and I think more effective division of labor that can happen where there's not an encroachment. They'll also, the administrative load in terms of evaluation can easily be cut in half, which will be a time saver that's going to be able to shore up the opportunities and take some of those curriculum responsibilities right in hand for our principals, if that answers your question.
The curriculum specialists considered teachers or are they considered administrators?
Yeah, no, they're under the teacher contract, and so they are definitely teachers. And so there were limits to things, and they were, truthfully, they were overtaxed in terms of that. I couldn't. I have such respect for their work. There are 100 different things they could do, and I don't even know that I could do it justice. But our elementary principal team, is going to be, presuming this change and this budget is supported, we'll be hard at work to look at all of those responsibilities and kind of. I think there are great efficiencies that we can find because we can operate with people inside of their contract and their obligations without any worry, and really focus a lot of the student relations and student work on that one individual and provide our elementary principals the opportunity to have a much greater focus on instructional leadership. Not that they don't already do a great job with it, it's just that they're often pulled from that with a number of other administrative kinds of responsibilities that will now have better division of labor over.
Two definitional questions that came up. 504 and SST, what is?
Thank you. Good question. SST stands for Student Success Team. It's basically like a small group meeting. It's not the same as a planning and placement team, which is a very formal, legally defined structure. It's a more informal structure where you're meeting with specialists and folks knowledgeable about a student, and often with engagement of a parent, to define interventions and look at student performance and sort of map out some individualized planning to help support them. And then 504 is Section 504 of it's student ADA, I believe, and it is refers to a law that basically says that when any child does not need to be, mandated under IDEA, under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, any child who has any significant disruption to a major life function can qualify for accommodations and a degree of support, and also has due process rights. So typically we see students who may have things like perhaps if it's ADHD or if it's some degree of dyslexia that doesn't warrant an identification under IDEA, who may have accommodations to their learning. And then you can also have shorter term accommodations that could fall under either a health plan or a 504 plan, something perhaps medical, that's for a shorter duration of time.
The curriculum specialist and the AP, because I'm not sure how it works here. Does the curriculum specialist have to have an admin credential? And, okay, so will they qualify to apply for AP positions if they don't have their admin credentials?
That's a great question. So no, our curriculum specialist position does not require admin credential and 092 certification. However, of our 11 curriculum specialists, 8 out of the 11 do have their 092, and 2 of those that do not have announced their retirement. So the overwhelming majority of the current sitting curriculum specialists will have the opportunity to apply if that's something that they're interested in, because as we're saying, we're not simply upgrading those positions per se. We are making a substantive change to the job responsibilities, and some of them have expressed interest, and others have. Some of them have said maybe they're considerate, but they're not necessarily not certain. So it will depend.
Is this the proper time for curriculum specialists and that change? I mean, we're going on to other parts of the budget after this. This is the part of the workshop for that?
So yeah, we did recently talk about supervision of instruction. So it kind of falls on 2 pages.
Okay.
It was on the first page with the elimination of the curriculum specialist, and it was on the supervision of instruction page.
So I wanted to follow up. We received a lot of emails about the curriculum specialist position, the AP. And one of the things that was brought up, and I wondered how we plan to address this, is that some of our schools have double the enrollment of other schools. And we have 4 schools with intensive programs. I would assume the intensive programs have a higher quantity of kids, a larger amount of kids with IEPs. And so in those schools, that assistant principal is going to have a caseload of IEPs much larger than other schools. And so really, when you look at all the elementary schools, they're not all equal as far as the number of kids enrolled, the number of IEPs. In general, large schools are used to having busier cafeterias, and the custodians do more work. And so things aren't always even Steven. But I'm wondering about the assistant principals in schools with the intensive programs. and the assistant principals in non-magnet schools, how balanced will be the workload? And is that something that we could find a way to use their talents in other ways or make sure it's more balanced?
Yeah, no, that's a very fair question. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start with an answer, then I'm gonna say part of the question I think will be better answered when Melissa talks, because we do still have our department supervisors within pupil services, and as part of this, we're looking at how those supports and services are structured, and I know she'll want to kind of give more detail to. It's an opportunity specifically at our program schools to have a greater footprint. Previously we had X number of pupil services department supervisors, and they had to divide their time across high school, middle school, the elementary schools, and our outside programs, and so on. And so with this, we do expect, certainly at some of our smaller schools, without programs, that while we still need to maintain a connection point with our pupil services department supervisors support, it won't be as needy, and that'll afford greater time. And then obviously at our larger schools with greater enrollment, there's typically also some degree of greater resources, but we're not proposing at this time like a proportionate model that you get 2 assistant principals, you get a half of an assistant principal. So it's a point that's very well taken, but I think let's let Melissa get through that part of it, and then even at the end, if we have additional questions, we can try to readdress that.
And with that, we'll move on to pupil services. So if you turn the page in your packet, we'll begin discussing pupil services special instruction, which correlates in your binder to pages E5 and E6. As you heard in Paul's presentation last week, and again at the top of today's presentation, pupil services and our special education is certainly a driver in the budget. When I was sitting here at this time last year, I was reporting a little over of 17% prevalence rate for students with disabilities in our district, and today we find ourselves at 19%. So we're seeing that jump just in one calendar year. And when we do a 5-year look back, we're looking at an increase of over 5%. So back in the 1920 school year, we were only at a 14% prevalence rate. And that's due to a number of factors. I think there is better child find and evaluative tools that we're using to both locate and identify and provide services for students with disabilities. We've had some key legislative changes that certainly impact our numbers. We saw some recent legislation this summer. You've heard more about kindergarten start age, which will impact our early learning center in different ways than our other preschool programs. But we also had the legislation that changed over the summer that impacted eligibility ages, which did have a great impact on the number of students that are served in our special education programs for longer. So if you remember, the age of eligibility once was the age of 21, then it was changed to the age of 22, and students were exiting upon the date of their 22nd birthday. This summer, through the summer legislation in June 2023, they changed that to afford the student a full year upon turning 22. So they exit at the end of the school year of which they turn 22, and the school year is defined as July 1 through June 30th. So potentially a student who has a birthday of July 1 might get their full year of their 22nd birthday should they be eligible. But those things are certainly drivers and impact the students that we're serving and the staff that we need. And we're very fortunate in West Hartford Public Schools. We're always being very responsive to our student needs. And so one of the other trends that I have shared with you is the number of move-ins. And so one of the things you're going to see is that we have increased from our original adopted budget to our current budget, an increase of 4.5 positions. And that reflects the high number of move-ins. We had over 70 move-ins just before September. So we do definitely see that West Hartford Public Schools is a destination district specifically for their students who have disabilities. Families will seek us out, and I think you've heard us say that before. Certainly an honor and privilege to serve those students and a great responsibility. And when we look ahead to future planning, one of the things you'll see is we're adding an additional 4 teachers. Again, this is in response to student needs, and so we're adding in another intensive academic teacher. When I presented recently to the board, I shared with you, in addition to the increasing trend, what we're seeing is an increase of more significant student needs and the requirements requirement for more specialized programming. And so as those students matriculate up to the middle school, that one intensive academic position will be added at Sedgwick Middle School. We're also adding 2 new resource teachers positions, one at Sedgwick and one at King Philip. And again, they're reflective of the increased program enrollment needs there. We are also maintaining a preschool/elementary, she's certified in both, teacher that was currently funded in ESSER, and you'll see that position added in the permanent budget. All of these are offset by a decrease of 1 position due to enrollment again in our intensive behavior program that wasn't needed.
So as Melissa enumerated, we are adding 8.5. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to project. We are adding 8.5 positions from the current adopted budget, and you see those figures reflected in our salary line, which has an increase of 13.9%. In addition, there's 2 other factors that are affecting that increase. Our post-secondary bookstore manager, I think you're all familiar with the next chapter across the street. That was a position that had been funded with the ESSER grant, and we are maintaining that position. It will be funded in the general fund for the upcoming year, so that is reflected there, as well as an increase in some of our costs for our extended school year program. So all of those factors, as well as the standard increase of wages through collective bargaining, are reflected in that salary line item. The other thing that you see in this division, which is a significant increase that we have talked about quite a bit, is our increase in tuition. So as Paul explained in his presentation last week, we are seeing a significant increase of $1.5 million in our appropriation for out-of-district tuition, and that's related to the 3 factors we've talked about. We have more students who are being placed out of district based on their special education needs. We've seen tuition increases for those placements, and probably most significantly, we have seen a shortfall in state funding based upon the state cap on the appropriation for the excess cost grant. So those 3 factors combined are resulting in a significant impact to our tuition and to our operating expense for this division.
Any questions? Ethan?
So, just trying to understand the impact of the state not covering, do you know how much that is specifically?
So if they had covered us, I was just looking at this, if they had covered us at a 100% instead of the 68% that we're expecting,
Yeah.
we would receive 2.5 million more this year.
But they didn't cover 100% last year.
They didn't. So the legislation says that we should be at 85%, but we're at 68 because of the cap. So the difference between those 2 is, I believe, 1.3 million.
Okay, so it'd be about a quarter of the increment. Because when I look at the total, and
Yeah.
I realize it is what it is, but 20%, 20% of the increase came, I'm sorry, 20% of the costs are pupil services, but 40% of the increase.
Say that again?
Your increase, your incremental from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
For pupil services, just because it's the nature of it, is 40%.
Yep.
So it'd be $1 million of that, which would make it lower. Okay, so it'd be about 30%.
Yep. So, and, certainly we hope that that's a topic they might address in this short session, but I have not heard that any progress has been made at this
They're
point.
doing electrical vehicles.
They're accepting testimony on the excess cost, I believe. I saw
Oh, are
a
they?
recent email, yeah.
Okay, hopefully.
You don't happen to know the bill number, do you, for the?
I will get it
Okay,
for you.
that'd be great.
On the program where the state is mandating students to stay in our system through the age of 22, is that an unfunded mandate or just this, that's an unfunded mandate?
It's an unfunded mandate.
Is the new dyslexia legislation also part of the increase from the 17 to 19%?
That's a really great question, Claire. So back in 2015, the state passed new legislation around the identification of dyslexia as one of the IDEA eligibility categories under specific learning disability. We have certainly seen an increase in our numbers of students being identified under specific learning disability for that reason. I will say that we have very strong child find activities here in the town of West Hartford specific to dyslexia, and are very sensitive to that to ensure that we're meeting students' needs. But it certainly has increased child find activities and special education services for students who might have dyslexia.
So this increase in outplacement and the lack of state funding for it, this is hitting across our state, but is it a problem in other states as well? And is it also tied to the lack of being able to find employees in these private facilities, and so they're having to raise salaries as well?
I could take the more local part of that question, but I don't know if you know about the national part, Paul. I'll defer to you. But I will say that we have always seen kind of a standard increase in tuition annually. We do know that there is definitely a difficulty in hiring staff. We have seen some of our schools notify us that they don't have certain practitioners, can't find speech and language pathologists, and I think all of our schools are struggling with finding related service providers, clinicians, and special education teachers. There is definitely a staffing crisis in our area, and I think we're not unique to that. I don't know if it's related to the cost of tuition. I think just general cost and overall is increasing, and I would say as the cost of living rises, I'm sure they're adjusting the rates that they're paying their staff in order for it to be a livable wage. So we are seeing those rises in tuition. Okay. Seeing no more questions, we'll turn to the next page and we will talk about related services. Related services refers to our social workers, our school psychologists, our speech and language pathologists, our PTs and OTs who support fine and gross motor skills, our teachers of the deaf, and our nursing, which does fall under pupil services. And in your binder, that correlates to pages E21 and E22. And so what you're going to see here is that from the adopted to current, I'm going to start there, we had a decrease of 0.8 in our social workers and an increase of a 1.0 in our school psychologists, and we had an increase of 0.5 in our nursing, which covered 1.0 nursing supervisor position that we are maintaining. And then there are 6 additional positions that are included in the budget, but it's important to note that 2 elementary social workers, the high school trauma interventionist who works in a triage position, and the teacher of deaf are currently funded with ESSER, and so we're just preserving those current positions that are staffed in this budget. So they're moving out of ESSER and into our permanent budget. So they're not truly a FTE add in the way that there's a new position being added. It's just the position will continue to be funded. The student needs substantiate that. We're also adding a new high school social worker position. And Claire, this goes to your question about the school engagement program. So that's to facilitate the school engagement program, and also an additional speech and language pathologist to address district-wide needs. And so we're always monitoring our caseloads, our student needs. And so as we looked at those, the area of speech and language has continued to increase, and we felt it was necessary to add a speech and language pathologist at this time. I'll pass it over to Liz.
Pardon, quick question.
Something I'm trying to understand in the budget, you went to page E21, but E16, 18, and 20 don't have any data listed under the chart, and then there's a page back earlier, the library media. So I'm just trying to understand why those pages don't have any data.
So those pages, when you look at the book, each section has really 2 pages with it. One details out by line item what the budget is. The other lists out the staffing. So for example, if you're looking at, I think you had mentioned
E16?
E16. So E16, when we look at that, that is the extended school year program. And so we allocate a budget to that, but it does not have full-time employees for that. So that's why that's, the chart itself is blank. I believe Melissa has her staff work that program, but they're not. It's an hourly basis, exactly. Thank you,
And
Andy.
same with homebound?
Same with homebound. We have
And out
tutors
of
who do that.
district?
Exactly.
Okay. So it's not an allocated employee to that program?
Correct.
No, it's because of the timing of it, it's in addition to their regular responsibilities.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So as we look at the budget for related services, you'll see the salary budget is supportive of the additional 6.7 positions that Melissa detailed for us. Our operating expenses show just a very slight reduction, and our equipment budget is increased by $6,000, and that reflects an anticipated need for assistive technology equipment that we will be buying. So again, happy to answer any questions on.
I'd like to go back to Claire's question. The tuition, I know it's going to increase, but 20%, $1.5 million. Is there any statistical thing to explain we're going from this to this? Because it's sort
I
of
can
blank.
put something together for you. I mean, I can give you the factors that go into calculating as far as the number of students, the average tuition that we see, and an anticipated increase, as well as the projected reimbursement rate for excess costs from the state, which they've said to be 68%.
Okay. Yeah, if you could,
Yep.
because it's a big number,
It is.
and it's impactful, and
And
I
it's
know it's probably, we've heard about tuition, so it's not a surprise, but it'd be, something there would be helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And the 32 students that have been brought back, that was in how long of a period of time?
That was over the past 2 years. They've been brought back. We continue every day. I got an email today about a student who's on their way back to district right now. So as students' needs change and we're able to, even if it's a bifurcated program, we're looking to bring them back, even if it's for a class or two at the middle school or high school before they're fully ready to transition.
Yeah, so I really feel that if we can teach within the school, unless there are reasons that they can't be taught in the school, it's so beneficial because that child then is going to grow to an adult who will then be functioning in the real world. And the more time they have with mainstream peers and a chance to take advantage of all the different great things that the schools offer. I wonder if the story is getting out about the success of your intensive programs and the things that the kids are doing in the unified program, because there's so much offered. There could be some real more success stories. And I understand there are places where that's the only place the child should be. But I also think that there's ways that there's a big benefit if they come back.
I couldn't agree with you more, Claire. I think that our continuum of services in district offers a stellar program, and I believe truly that our students have the best outcomes when they're in the least restrictive environment and have access to their neighborhood schools with their peers. I'm very proud of the programs that our district currently has and the staff that work in those programs who are highly specialized, incredibly talented and trained, and have the most amazing opportunities for our students. It's really incredible what they're able to accomplish and what they're doing each and every day. The milestones might sometimes be slow, but they're just remarkable over time, and it's truly incredible. We certainly do not look outside of our own continuum if we haven't exhausted all efforts, and I truly mean all efforts. But as Paul had intonated when we talk about the restructuring, one of our efforts is really, one of our largest goals is to be able to have more eyes around our programming so that we know our students, we can look at our programming models and ask those questions of how we can better support, or if there's a demographic that we are missing or another way we can do this so that we can have more of our students back in district. But that certainly is a goal of ours, and that's where we've been focusing our efforts in bringing students back when they're ready. And we've really adopted the mentality that if we are going out, it's for a short, intensive period, and our goal is always to bring them back, and we communicate that with families in the onset, and they really see that through the partnership, even when students are outplaced.
Yeah, so Melissa, I just wanted to clarify something, and I had gone back and forth a little bit with Paul on this, but it's not entirely clear to me. We have approximately 130, I want to say 132 students that are in out of district placement. But then you're saying that we've brought back 32 students, but then the cost has gone up 20%. So does that mean that we really had like 150 students that were out of placement, or 160 students, we brought back 32? Or it's a little confusing because we seem like we brought back all these students, but the numbers are
Yeah.
20% higher.
It's such a good question. So pupil service is a snapshot in time. Any day you ask me what number we're at, it's going to be a different number because our students are moving and our plans change as our students change. And so today we're at 130 students that are outplaced. I think in Liz's budget book it's actually 115 officially. But we bring back students, and there might be students going out. Similar to the move-in trend I shared just over the summer, our move-ins also impact our out-of-district numbers. So if a student is outplaced from a neighboring district and they move into West Hartford Public Schools, we're inheriting the out-of-district placement until we can understand what the child's needs are and if we could bring them back. And so that does impact us. We've had 19 move-ins that were already out of district placed this school year. And so we've never had at one given moment in time a number as high as 160 ever, but that number does fluctuate based on students coming in and out. And so while I'd love to be able to say we brought 32 students back and no other students went out and no other students moved in that were outplaced, and we were actualizing those savings and we're celebrating that, it's just the nature of student needs is that we're constantly reviewing and understanding what they need and going with what's the best programming option for them.
So is it a net decrease in the amount of students that are now in out of district placement, or is it actually because all these other students are moving in a net increase?
I look at the number.
And I understand
yeah.
it changes, all the time. Right.
It's kind of a wash. We were at 104 at this time last year, so we're technically from this point last year, we're up. But certainly when you think about the number of students that have been brought back and the students have come in, that number just fluctuates, and it's fluctuating around that range, I guess I would say, at this moment in time.
Just following up on the two comments before, it might be interesting, and obviously you're bringing students back for the qualitative benefit, but it would also be good from a budget perspective this is how much we have saved, and take credit for that. No, I just mean,
It's
because it's a
great.
20% increase,
Yes.
and it
Absolutely.
could be worse, unfortunately.
Sure. Any other questions on the related services page? All right. If you turn the page in your book, in your packet rather, we will move on to pupil services supervision, and that correlates to pages E33 and E34. You've already heard a little bit of our restructuring plan, and so this is our opportunity to talk a little more in depth about the changes that will happen in pupil services. So currently, we have 7.7 pupil services department supervisors, and so we'll be reducing 0.9 to add the assistant director position. We really see that based on the departmental needs and growth, that this is a really proactive restructuring to really help proactive forward thinking to continue to refine our programming and enhancements that we've been making, reviewing our efficiencies, our structures, and most importantly, focusing on student outcomes so that we can ensure that they're meeting with success. And so it's a net gain of 0.35.
And as we look at the budgetary impact of that change, you'll see that our salaries go up approximately 900,000 or 9.9% for next year. That is reflective of the new assistant director position offset by our change in department supervisors, but is also significantly impacted by our pupil services support positions. So these are registered behavior technicians, language facilitators, and paraprofessionals. And as Melissa had mentioned, we have certainly seen an increase in our population of students with specialized needs, and so there is a corresponding increase in those support positions, and which is reflected in next year's budget. From an operating perspective, we actually have a reduction in our operating expense. This is for professional technical services. We incur costs to have independent evaluations, consultant services, testing, interpreters, et cetera. And based on our experience and really a concerted effort to limit those and control costs whenever possible, we are proposing a reduction in that line item for next year.
Any questions?
That's
us. All right. All right, coming full circle here. We're almost done. We're going to review the general support services. These are pages F2 and F5 under your tab for general support. And really from a program change, the only change we have in the current year, we left a vacant social worker position open. And this position was responsible for being a liaison with the town social work department. And we're eliminating this, it's been eliminated from the Office of Equity Advancement. In addition, there's a part-time administrative position that was in our office that is not filled. And so for the 2024-25 school year, the Office of Equity Advancement maintains its current staffing of a family and community engagement coordinator and our executive director of equity advancement.
And then as we look at the budget, this area of the budget really covers all of central office and all the maintenance and care of our school buildings, our insurance, et cetera. So I did want to take just a little bit of time to highlight some of the more significant changes. When we look at our salaries, it's really just our contractual rate increases and our staff changes as we had detailed previously. When you look at the detailed line items in the book, you'll see that there is an increase in our deferred compensation appropriation. This represents the hybrid pension plan. So as we hire new non-certified personnel, they have a hybrid pension plan, and so we end up making a deferred compensation contribution for them. In addition, you'll see an increase in our unused sick leave at retirement, which just reflects rate increases in our estimated retirement activity, which we spoke of previously. When we look at our benefits line item, that includes our health and medical insurance budget, and the fluctuation there reflects anticipated staffing, an estimated premium increase with the state partnership plan, as well as use of our health reserve to offset costs, particularly in the area of retiree health. You'll see an increase in Social Security on our benefits line, which is just consistent with wages and actual experience. Interestingly, you will see that our contribution to the town pension for non-certified staff actually decreases $520,000, and this is based on the school's allocation of the actuarially determined employer contribution that we receive from the town, as well as repayment of the debt obligation bonds, pension obligation bonds that had been issued by the town. I can either stop there for questions or go through the whole.
Ethan, please, has a question.
I have a couple questions. The workers' comp, the 21% increase seems, is there some kind of, I work for a manufacturing company, and workers' comp is real. And not to say, it's just a different,
Yeah.
it just seemed, the numbers seem to be an incredible increase.
Yeah, so that line item is workers' compensation, but it is also self-insurance and insurance. It's all three. Those programs are run by the town. We have an internal service fund called the Risk Management Fund, and for most of those programs, we self-insure. So every year, the town looks at our claims history, our inherent risk of of each of the different functions, both police, fire, teachers, et cetera, determines a budget, and then allocates that out based upon claims experience and inherent risk. We have seen a significant increase in our purchased insurance, which I think, particularly as it relates to property, liability, et cetera. And so it's a
But if the town's self-insured, should reflect should reflect your experiences, whether you had damage or you had somebody get hurt or.
And it does. So there are two components. There's a self-insured component, which we are self-insured for the first, I believe, 250,000, depending on the type of program. So we actually have an actuary who does our calculation to see what our incurred liability is, what our IBNR is. So we look at that. We have to make sure that we fund all of our reserves properly. We also elect to purchase certain insurances, both excess insurances for over 250,000 up to, I believe, 15 million. And then there are just certain coverages such as cyber liability that we elect to purchase and not self-insure. So it's a combination of those three. It's the insurance component, it's the self-insurance component, and it's the workers' comp component. The workers' comp component has two factors to it. We do pay a certain amount based on premiums by class of employees, and then we have to cover claims as well.
No, I understand. I just, if you're having incidents, then we need to look, there needs to be look at what's causing it. But
Exactly.
it
So
just
the
seems-
risk management department is actually a shared department. They service both the town and the schools. And they have a pretty active, I would say, safety program where they go out to the schools, not only look at the schools to ensure that they're safe, but do a lot of training with our employees.
I'm still struggling with the 21%. Next question, the unused sick leave at retirement, is this people who have actually, or employees who are actually, you've anticipated retiring, and that's how much they're gonna take away from sick leave?
Exactly. And so we assume a certain number of retirements each year based upon historical information, and apply each of their union contracts to that amount, and estimate that.
And then the final one was the health medical. How much of that's a function of, I think you said there was a reserve that the town had reduced, or is
So-
that year over year? I was wondering what the impact was.
Yeah, year over year. So the health piece is really a couple of different components. You know, we pay directly premiums for active employees, retired employees, our Medigap, our dental, et cetera. And as well, we need to put away funds for our other post-employment benefits. And so we are using the retiree health reserve to cover that contribution. So it's a couple $100,000 less than it was last year.
Okay, because the increase was about 2.5 million, so it's not that substantial.
No,
in
it's
the
not.
total. Okay. All right. It just seems like large increases.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had a question about the family services liaison. So for West Hartford Social Services, their role is to help all families in West Hartford with, do they deal with residency and health and all those kind of tragedies and challenges that reach families, right?
Correct.
So we have a position within our Board of Ed budget that's a liaison to help all families through the school system access West Hartford Social Services.
So we've had a position under ESSER for the last 2 years. That was, so it's not in your board, it's not in the general fund, but certainly is West Hartford employee for the last 2 years. That has supported, and really, you know, it was impact of the pandemic, and when we looked at school engagement and some of the chronic absenteeism that I think we were talking about when we first came back from the pandemic, you know, those were two of our schools that had more significant impact. So we took advantage of the ESSER funding at that time to create a home-to-school liaison position. We hired a very capable bilingual individual who had done similar work for us out of grant funding at an hourly basis. Was working between a couple of different grant funds to support families, typically ESOL families with these translation services. And, you know, given the given the period of time that we were in, just coming through and beyond the pandemic, really saw the opportunity with the funding that was available to kind of escalate that support to meet the needs that the greatest needs that we were seeing internally with our own staff. And as that, both as we've kind of moved further away from the pandemic, and certainly as that funding itself has sunset, we are planning to return to our more traditional means of supporting those services more on a part-time basis and an hourly basis through the grants that we have available to us. But I know that you've received, inquiries and emails in and around that.
But the family services liaison works in the DEI department?
No, so
Or is it family engaged? There's two different names, very similar. One is a social worker that works,
correct. So in our Department of Equity Advancement, for the last 3 years, we've had a position that's called the Family and Community Engagement Coordinator. And that's a person that's working specifically on family engagement, community partnerships to advance the work in and around DEI. They're varying, and I should let Teresa really have some opportunity to have some airtime tonight, but she can, please, we'll pass the mic over, but she does things, she's very engaged with our one community work.
Yes.
Different from the home to school liaisons. Let me just have Teresa describe what her
one is
person
more
does.
DEI, and one is more social services.
One is more DEI, but the other position's not a social worker, but yes, working on those things, helping with the registration, helping families kind of navigate, and specifically a lot of the obstacles that we see often can be language barriers, can be familiarity with the systems. So it's really some direct support. Like, let me stand with you and help you and work with you through the registration process, or let me help you fill out these forms for school and make you have an understanding of, what doctor's notes we might need and things of this nature that are, they're easier for folks if you've been born here, if you've lived here, if you've gone through the system. Those it's not this, it's not as massive as kind of a.
Right. Well, the gist of my question is, West Hartford Social Services, say there's residents in nursing homes that have challenges. There's parents that have children of school age. I would assume that West Hartford Social Services reaches out to help those families, or they must come to the town hall. And I'm just wondering, how much of a responsibility is it West Hartford Social Services to also reach into the schools where they would help elderly in nursing homes or people in, and so I understand that it's nice to have a liaison and that sometimes families aren't as comfortable coming to the town hall. It's easier to get help within your school, but social services are there for everybody. And there's language barriers to accessing social services. And so I see the need for the position you have, but I also know that when we had a family experienced a fire, the psychologist at Duffy helped connect them to who they needed to. We had social workers. We dealt with the crises within our buildings to help the families, and we didn't have a specialist to do that.
That's correct. Do you want me to?
I just don't want to have her not have enough. Yeah.
Sure. The role that falls in the Office of Equity Advancement is really about advancing the work that we're doing. So we work primarily with the schools, with administration and teachers, but we also recognize that there's a really important need to partner with our community as well, right, and with our parents and our families. The work that is done. By, I don't know if I'm allowed to say her name, but Shayna in my office, really does help bridge that work. So, we're a small but powerful unit that really works to kind of help impact the entire community. And we recognize that community extends beyond just what happens during the school day. So we know that we need access to parents and families. We need access to community. We run the One Community meetings that brings in community partners along with family members. It's really open to anyone in the public who wishes to join, so that they stay connected with the work that we're doing. This year, our focus being on creating cultures of belonging, but that they stay connected and allow them to actually weigh in and provide opportunities to connect and also augment the work that we're doing during the school day and our messaging. So Shayna's she partners with school buildings and helping them with their family engagement activities. We know that when families are more engaged with school, we all reap the benefits of those opportunities. So yeah, it's two of us, strong and mighty. We work hard. But that's, yes, definitely a different role. You just let me not talk.
About the other position, yeah, Shayna's wonderful. So, but about the other position, because it's going to go back to hourly now, right? So I was just thinking about, I know you guys were talking about diversity and stuff, and I think my understanding is that that person that was doing that full-time role is bilingual, is a Latino woman. I guess I'm just thinking, like, is this a person that represents, the communities that we want to, when we're talking about diversity in staff, are we now taking away, are we messing with someone's livelihood? Are we taking away a full, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess that's my concern. Like, I'm thinking about the commitment to equity, to diversity, to having staff that reflect the community, and then seeing someone who has, reflects the community, has built that trust with the community, and they're going from full-time to hourly. Like, I'm thinking about the sustainability of that. So I don't know, like that, I think that's what's kind of, it seems like those are the roles, and the people that are usually in those roles are people of color, or are women. And, like it just doesn't feel right. So I guess like I understand like, the money part of it in terms of it was funded by ESSER before, but there is a need for that, and there's going to continue to be a need for that. I think, there's a big political time coming up now too, and I just think like in terms of having people that build that trust with families, that reflect the community, that are bilingual, that represent, that equity and that diversity, I'm just nervous about starting a pattern of cutting down those positions from full-time to part-time and making them hourly, and like, thinking about who are we cutting down? What are the implications of that on that individual and the community at large? What message does that send to the community? So I think that's the thing. I think that's kind of eating at me a little bit.
If oh, pardon. I appreciate the comment, and I think and that's why this is a wonderful opportunity for us to have the workshop, to ask the questions and to make the comments and to get more granular details as to how we come to where we are. And I think, again, with all that was said and recognizing the importance and value of all of that, I think I'm trying to see where there is a glimmer of optimism. Bear with me with this. And from what I gather with the position that we're talking about, it was one that was implemented in response to the pandemic, utilizing ESSER funding. And as we know, with ESSER funding, it was to be exclusively allocated to those areas that were directly impacted by the pandemic. And so, such a blessing that that position was able to be there to come to a need and address the needs of the families. And so with where we are now of we all knew this conversation was going to come in terms of what to do with ESSER, what to do once ESSER is gone. And so thankful that there has been proactive looking ahead from way back when. And so here, certainly what's being said, when I said in terms of the glass half full, it's like, it's a blessing that we are not in the crisis mode as we were then now. So that is a good thing. But we certainly still have needs. And what I'm not hearing is that there are not other areas where we're going to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the families and of the communities in creative ways. So I'm hearing that, correct? I'm not hearing we're not going to meet the needs. And so I think it's a matter of how we do that. But your points are absolutely well taken. We must ensure that we continue to operate through a lens of equity. We must ensure how we are having our walk match our talk in terms of those whom we are employing. I think we are moving into a zone of shifting differently, but not steering away from our overall goal and mission. So I appreciate very much you. That's why we need these conversations, to keep us grounded in why we're here, why we need to do what we need to do. So thank you, and that's why we appreciate all of what you're sharing as well, to ensure and to give us vote of confidence that we're moving in that direction. But we need the real talk. So thank you, thank you.
And I know it's tough. I just gotta say it.
Well, the only thing I was going to add, and I know we'll get to it, I don't want to cut Liz short on any opportunity for more explanation on the page that she's on, but when we do move to the next page and we talk through the entirety of the ESSER grant, I mean, I would not say that there's a single position on there, and certainly not the one that you're describing. There's not a single position on there that isn't value added to the district, and that hasn't been a very positive contribution. And all of them, I mean, there were 31.75 positions under ESSER, and we retained, I believe, 9 of them. So there's a significant reduction overall in terms of individuals and skills, and that's our goal. Is, as I think, as Lauren very aptly stated, we're not able to necessarily maintain all of that staffing, but there are services and expectations that we want that need to, and student needs that need to be continued to be met, and that is how we're trying to allocate resources in order to ensure that we can continue to meet those needs. There's not a single cut on here in terms of these ESSER positions that was in any way, shape, or form easy, and that speaks to the quality of the individuals that are, that are currently doing that work.
So let me just, thank you. Okay. Let me just wrap up this page. We really hit most of the items either with questions or because we had addressed them. Just a couple more things. We are in the second year of our transportation contracts with both our in-district and out-of-district providers. So we are seeing just our contractual rate increase there. Our utilities is actually a good news story. You may recall as we adopted last year's budget, we were expecting some significant rate increases. While we did see increases, they were moderated, and really everyone has done a good job at holding usage to a consistent level. So we are actually seeing a reduction in that appropriation of $188,000. From an equipment standpoint, we do have just a few purchases planned, a planned replacement of a facilities maintenance vehicle, as well as some floor maintenance machines for our custodial staff, and some landscaping equipment. So, this support services area is kind of a very broad area, but I've tried to hit kind of the highlights, but happy to answer any other questions that anyone may have before we flip over to the ESSER page.
Questions? Yes.
Sorry. We are currently employing 22 full-time security officers in our schools?
Correct.
Okay. So that didn't change?
It did not.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. So as we flip to our ESSER page, we wanted to include this because certainly we have all been talking about ESSER for many years now. We knew that the time would come where this funding would sunset. And so we have been planning for this time, and we wanted to just take an opportunity to show you the current positions that are being staffed with our ESSER funds as adopted in the past year. Grant is funding 31.75 positions with a total cost of $5 million. And the grant actually expires in September 30th, but we expect that we will be fully expended by June 30th. So for the upcoming year, you will see there are no positions and no dollars budgeted. However, if you are interested, we can run through the list of the positions and just highlight for you which ones are reflected in the general fund budget. Is that something you're interested in? Yes?
Please,
Okay.
thank you.
So as we go down the list, we did not need to keep our elementary classroom teachers based upon the change in kindergarten age. We did not keep the elementary interventionist. We went back to a shared model with 2 of our elementary schools. We did keep our ESOL teacher, that one position, based upon students who have identified needs as English language learners. For the teacher in residency, we kept 1 of those positions, and we're looking forward to having that program again next year. We did not keep the additional middle school assistant principal, but we did keep the 2 middle school teachers based on our anticipated enrollment at Sedgwick. We did not keep the additional high school teacher, nor specifically the 3 math coaches. We did keep the special education teacher. That was the pre-K resource teacher that Melissa discussed. We also kept a teacher of the deaf. As Paul discussed in a little bit of detail, we did not keep the school counselors. Those 7 counselors were at an elementary and a middle school level, but we are returning back to our previous status of 25 counselors. We are keeping the trauma interventionist that will be grant funded. We are not keeping the mental health coordinator, but we are keeping 2 out of the 3 social workers. We are keeping the behavioral services interventionist, and that will be grant funded. And we are keeping the pupil support specialist, which was the bookstore manager that we talked about previously.
Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, on the math coaches, did we keep some of those under the grant funding?
Yes, I'm sorry. So I was thinking as I went through. So we had 3 math coaches. We will be keeping 2 of them under grant funds.
We saw a big improvement, right, with math scores with using the coaches, correct?
Yeah, I think I believe we've given some report in the past and demonstrated the impact and return on investment of our coaching, and the ones that we're keeping, we have some that are in, I want to say they're in, the ones that we already have, they're not in the general fund, they're in grant funding already.
Yes.
And the ones that we're going to keep, we're targeting for needs that we've identified primarily at the middle school level. And
I'm just curious, the grant funding, is it centralized within the Board of Ed here at the town hall, or are different department people working on grant funding? I know Melissa works on some grant funding, but how?
sort of a yes and a no. The majority of the grant funding is centralized here at Town Hall. Title I, our big grants, big federal grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, all live within central office. IDEA rests with Melissa. Our bilingual grant, some smaller grants, our bilingual grant, our immigrant grant, which is related to Title III, lives within Ann's office. Our Perkins grant, which is a fairly substantial grant, lives and is managed by our department supervisor for career and technology education, and our open choice grant, also centrally here within central office. What are some of the other? Those are a lot of the major ones.
Those are really the major ones, and all of them go through my office. Okay. As far as reporting, drawdowns, that type of thing.
And then you'll have like plant and facilities, is applying for grants, security grants, all of those things are.
And in general, West Hartford is kind of Johnny on the spot, finding out what's coming.
We try to be.
Sure. Yeah.
100%.
So you don't miss many and aren't turned down for many.
No, the big grant, we were very fortunate. I know opportunity for Teresa to share more. We were very fortunate to receive the middle school summer grant that we recently applied for. That was a joint venture between Teresa and Ann. We're super excited about that. I think Ann's talked to you in the past about a grant through the state to increase early college experience, or is it through the state or through UConn? It was through the state. we've had great luck with the Smart Start grant. So we, the big ones that are out there that we vie for, we put in for them.
Related question. The schedule you were just reading off of, I assume was H3, but H3 shows nothing being current. So was there a different page you were reading off of?
No, that was the page, so, it's
Because it
each,
shows budget 25, everything's zeroed out.
yes, because for the upcoming year, we won't have any of,
Well, there
we
won't be
won't have
ESSER,
those
but-
funds.
They're funded through other means.
So
No, I know,
they'll-
I got that, but is there a schedule that shows, here's the ones we were able to translate
So it's
over?
the last page of your packet, I think we were actually reading from, which corresponds to data on those pages.
Oh, the new one?
Yeah, the very last
Oh,
page
I
of
was
the
on the
packet.
old, I was using the book. All right.
Sorry.
Well, and they do mirror each
Yeah,
other.
it's just a summary.
It's a summary on H3, so I was just running down and saying, no, we couldn't keep it, or yes, we did keep it. We've talked about each of them as we went through each
No, I
section.
understand. I thought I was following you, and then I saw, you said we kept it, but it shows a zero on the page.
Got it.
So I got it.
Yeah, so for instance, the ESOL position that we did keep,
Yeah.
obviously it's no longer going to be coded under ESSER because ESSER's gone, but it was coded under the ESOL, and you saw that as an increase. on the
Right, but
page.
I'm looking and saying.
Yep, understood.
Got it. Thank you.
So, out of the 31.75 positions, we're eliminating 27 of them and keeping approximately 4? No, is that wrong?
We eliminated 21. We were able to put some to grant funding, and we are keeping 9 in the general fund.
9?
Yeah, the reason you're looking at that 27, Gail, again, that's the question of adopted versus, we originally, when we first probably presented a year ago, hey, how are we templating ESSER 3? We were planning for 27 positions. When you look to the right of that under current, we actually staffed 31.75 positions out of it. So that's just kind of in keeping of reporting the variance as adopted versus what's expected moving forward. But obviously all 31.75 positions will no longer be able to be funded through ESSER, and we've maintained 9 of them.
Okay. Is there a list, I know it's somewhere sort of in here, but is there a list of just those 9 positions somewhere? Or is it-
I have a list, and I can provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, well, please do not take our silence as not having any. It's just not having any at this time as we digest all that has been shared. Thank you so much for going through. However, we know that we have another opportunity to engage with you at our workshop number 2, where we can follow up with additional questions and thoughts and things along those lines. But once again, we'll ask teammates, any questions or comments with what has been shared thus far? Again, we thank you for preparing us for this day for some time. And we know that this is one of our primary charges, teammates, as Board of Ed members, certainly when it comes to issuing the budget, policy, and appointing superintendents. So this is an important time. And we will continue the conversation in 2 weeks. One last time, in terms of the, yes, that's all right. Certainly, yes.
At the last session, when you presented it, you shared that you were expecting a $2 million increase based on the moving up the ECS timeline, but that, I think, has been called into question by the governor's budget. So is there a version of the budget that would be consider if that 2 million was not available, or are we secure with that 2 million?
So the biennial budget that had been adopted originally did propose an acceleration of the ECS funding. It was since proposed that it be accelerated even more, and that's why it got to the 2 million. That grant is actually shows up on the town's budget. It is a grant that goes directly to the town and is not a reimbursement grant, so it does not go to our budget. So you really don't see the impact of that here. What we're really looking at are expenditures. I, to be honest, had not heard that there was a big question about that. But certainly we'll keep an eye on that so that we can keep the town informed as to that status. But you won't see it reflected. Any change that's made or any variation will not be seen in our budget.
Sorry. I thought I heard at the last meeting that it's the town's money, not the school system's money. So it's not.
Correct.
It's there, but it's really not. So to me, it's.
Well,
not
it's
relevant.
kind of, it has to be used for educational purposes, but, you know, the total grant is 25 million, and our budget is certainly much larger than that. So we use the grant for educational purposes, but then the rest is supported by tax dollars and other
No, I
funding
got that.
sources.
But does the 2 million or?
Yeah, so the 2 million won't surface as an entry in the Board of Education budget that gets voted on in one direction or another. So I think what we were trying to show was, hey, on the town side, you know, we're putting forward this increase. Were that money to come directly to us, or what would the net impact be, given the fact that there's going to be more money available for the town? That would be the net impact. But what you need to vote on is separate from that. And
Right,
so
that's
when
what I
you
thought.
vote, that's the 5.8.
Because it'd be nice if the town said you could have the money, but I didn't
And,
get that
and,
sense.
and it will go to, you know, as Liz just shared, you know, there's a requirement for them to spend it on education. So basically, all of that educational cost-sharing money, in one way, shape, or form, offsets the educational budget. But your Board of Education budget is in excess of what the state provides, obviously.
Understand, because it'd be nice to be below 5%. Just my pitch.
I can't find the page, but I thought there was something about 300,000 for adult education. Is that language and ESOL, or is that leisure services education? And that's in our own budget.
So the 300,000 is for mandated adult education. That's our continuing ed division. And so it's mandated programs. I don't know specifically which programs are mandated, but that's a consistent appropriation. We do apply for a grant. We receive approximately 60,000, but then we are responsible for paying the rest. It's a state mandate.
And are those adults taught within the school with school staff?
Would you like to explain? I can do it if you'd like, but I can, if you want to.
I'll take a stab at it. So many times the staffing is school staff, but they also have their own certifications, and it runs. They're not housed necessarily in the schools. We have different location sites. There's a church. I can't remember what the church is. Maybe you should.
There's a number of different sites and different programs. It's not only GED, but there's citizenship programs and such. Most of them are run after school hours. Occasionally, they're housed dependent upon need or projected location needs. Sometimes they're housed in some of our schools in the early evenings.
And this is mandated by the state?
Correct.
That all districts
That all-
offer
yes.
adult ed?
Correct.
And it's paid for by the elementary, high school, and middle school budget, but it's an extension? I mean, is it?
It has its.
It's part of the
supported by the
school
grant
budget.
and then part of the school budget, but it's not allocated out to individual schools to
Yeah,
run.
it's a separate line within our
separate.
budget.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so we'll come together again March 27th. First, we'll have our public hearing, and then we'll have workshop number 2. To complete the formalities of process, I will seek a motion to conclude.
So moved?
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Board workshop concluded at 8:52. Thank you so much.
We're meeting for regular.